I want to thank Ruben for bringing you today's video via his support on Patreon. Hearthhull, upon first glance you would be forgiven for thinking it's just another Jund lands matter list, but this one actually cares specifically about sacrificing creatures, which is something a little bit different at least. Once it's been crewed up to 2, you can pay 1 tap, sack a land to draw 2 and play an additional land. At 8+, it is a 6/7 flying vigilance haste that sees lands sacrificed and has each opponent lose 2 life. So if you can start chaining off your land sacrifices, you can just bleed your opponents out there. So of course we want to be crewing up the Hearthhull within the first turn or 2 of it entering, if not the very turn it enters. And that's why we've got some big landfall token generators in the list. The most noteworthy one here you would assume is the Baloth Prime from the very same set. A 10/10 with stun counters on it, but it untaps itself whenever you sack a land, so we're not really all that worried about that. And enters with 4/4 beast tokens, so the Baloth Prime alone is enough to crew up our commander all the way. Titania makes 5/3, so a couple of those isn't going to be too difficult to generate either. 4/4s with the Baloths, the plants aren't going to be small for too long, and Omnath makes 5/5 elementals as well as throwing lightning bolts all over the place. Then our commander wants to see us sacrificing lands once it's leveled up, so it enables itself a little bit. It can sacrifice 1 land, but it's a tap ability, so abilities that can sacrifice a land whenever they want are useful. Sylvan Safekeeper to give Shroud, add a mana with squandered resources, 2 life from Zerun Orb, but then there's more utility variants of this as well. So the Elvish Reclaimer fishes out any land once we've paid the cost and sacrificed a land. Orcish Lumberjack adds 3 mana in Gruul colours. Braids can sacrifice a land and likely draw us 3 cards at the end of every turn. Every one of our turns anyway. Entish Restoration, Springbloom Druid, Harrow and Larval Scoutlander all sacrifice a land and then go and grab us some more lands. Similar effect is Scapeshift. This can get us any lands, not just basics, so we pretty much sacrifice our entire land base, replace them all with a bunch of utility lands, probably the best lands in the deck. That triggers our land sacrifice matters stuff, as well as all the landfall triggers as well. Corvold, similar to Braids, just a means of sacrificing and keeping our hand full. Can get additional card draw from it with Gitrog as well. That is one of the sacrifice lands matters cards. Wanted to try Evendo from this set as well, a mana dork that can enable our land sacrificing stuff. And then one I have high hopes for is a reasonably new one, Pitiless Carnage. Sacrifice any permanents we control and draw that many. So we could use this to sacrifice all our lands, refill our hand, and then cast a spell that will reanimate all the lands. Why don't we go on to those effects next? So there's a few means of land reanimation. We'll go over the mass reanimation first. Aftermath Analyst is really good because it can be reanimated. 3 and a sack, return all lands to the battlefield tapped. Obviously the more you reanimate it, the more you can make use of that effect. Splendid Reclamation, the same thing but on a sorcery. Will of the Sultai for an additional mana also dumps a bunch of plus counters on our commander that has evasion, so we may well be able to threaten commander damage with this. And then Lumra is just going to be a big dumb beater. More importantly, the ETB reanimates all the lands. And then we've got incremental land advantage from the graveyard with Crucible of World effects. Conduit of Worlds can also allow us to play a non-land permanent if we want to. And Ancient Green Warden also doubles up our landfall. Some of the landfall effects being right here, Lotus Cobra, Nissa and Tireless Provisioner are going to add mana for us upon landfall. Then Tireless Tracker and the Valakut Exploration are going to get us some card advantage. Valakut Exploration goes particularly well in this list because it helps with the bleed effects. Geode Rager, if we're going to be tapping down creatures into station effects, then Geode Rager helps by protecting our life total in combat. It's not too difficult to get landfall 3 times in a turn, meaning that all 3 of your opponents can't attack you, and in fact have to attack each other, thanks to the goad effect on this. Then Spring Heart Nantuko, it just has to go in every lands matter deck. Worst case scenario, it makes a load of insect tokens, but more importantly it could create really dangerous copies of things, even if it's just on a Lotus Cobra to generate you a bajillion mana in a turn. Or something like the Mossborn Hydra, having more than one of these will be very scary for your opponents because this on landfall doubles up its own plus counters and you literally can get hundreds of thousands of damage with this. With said landfall effects, you want to be making multiple lands in a turn, not only to ramp ahead, but to get those triggers that we just mentioned. Exploration, Azusa, the best way of doing it, 2 additional lands a turn. Dryad of the Elysian Grove allows us to fix our colours as well. Loot is going to be some card advantage for us, as is Case of the Locked Hothouse. Once it has been solved, it's a little bit slow, but you get more advantage out of this than Oracle of Moldiah in my experience. And a really good new one. This seems to be the type of card that isn't going to be reprinted for a long time, and it's probably going to get very, very expensive. I remember when Oracle of Moldiah was like $50 because it took them an age to reprint it. If you have any interest in this one whatsoever, then I think you should get it sooner than later, because I think it's only going to go up in value. Play an additional land on each of your turns, and you can play cards from the graveyard on the same card. And if that wasn't good enough, it self-mills as well to feed itself more lands to play from the bin. Very, very good card this, and if you can find it cheap or trade for it, I would if I were you. After that, the ramp package, pretty typical of any green deck, let alone a lands matter list. Got some noteworthy cards I can go over here as well. This thing makes Wayfarer's Baubles, brings lands in untapped as well. Realms Uncharted, oftentimes we can play lands from the bin anyway, so we just fish 4 lands we want and they'll end up in play one way or another. 6 to play permanents from our graveyard. Travelling Chocobo doubles up our landfall triggers again. Rootbound Purifier I haven't found room for ever since it released. I've wanted to play it ever since I saw it spoiled. We can use cards like the Kodama's Reach and Rampant Growth to go and grab basics out of our library, except they won't be basics, they'll be Gaia's Cradles, Field of the Deads, things like that. And Ashaya makes all our creatures into lands, so that makes landfall on our creatures entering. And if we have to sacrifice any creatures to Edict effects, which are now rife in Commander, then Ashaya will trigger the land sacrifice stuff as well. Finally, just a few lands I wanted to point out. A lot of them are quite typical. Beseju, Cabal Coppers, along with the Urborg, Field of the Dead and Vesuva. Vesuva's likely going to become a copy of Field of the Dead. This is going to be able to station our stuff quite well also. Speaking of which, Evendo and the Susa are station planets, which we hope to get some good value from. 2 mana tap, pay 2 life, sack a creature, draw equal to the power. And this one is another Gaia's Cradle. Once it's up to 12 charge counters, we actually have Gaia's Cradle in the list as well. All 3 of our game changers in this bracket 3 list are lands. Field of the Dead, Gaia's Cradle, and Glacial Chasm can stop us taking any damage. As for combos, I don't want to spend too much longer. You can look at combo-finder.com yourself if you like. With Ashaya and Titania in play, you can drop Vesuva in play, making it a copy of the now land version of Titania. It's still a legend, so you have to sacrifice Vesuva in this case to the legend rule. That will make you a couple of 5/3 elementals because a land has been sacrificed, as well as fishing the Vesuva back into hand with Titania's first ability, Rinse and Repeat, for infinite ETBs, LTBs, infinite 5/3 elemental tokens. You can do the same thing with Lumra. Vesuva dies to the legend rule. Lumra brings the Vesuva back into play, because when it enters mill 4, return all your lands. That is a means of getting all your lands into play from your library, but you will be milling your entire library doing that. So maybe you just use that to ramp ahead a little bit or get some extra landfall triggers that you need. Glacial Chasm, as I said before, it prevents all the damage dealt to you, and you don't necessarily have to pay the cumulative upkeep cost of 2 life. You can instead use this combo where you can play your lands from the graveyard, play the Glacial Chasm along with the land you had to sacrifice in order to get it in, and for the rest of the game you can't be dealt any damage as long as these permanents stay in play. There's a lot of redundancy in the list, but that's pretty much it. It's a lot of similar combos with different types of cards, but they all do similar things, so this is where all the redundancy comes from. So there we are, that's a quick overview of Hearthhull and what we're looking to do with this list. Let's see how we fare. Well, we've got a bunch of green mana there, so decided to keep this up against Lord of Tressorhorn, Lagomos, and In Spirit, and draw into a Lotus Cobra for the turn, so definitely get that down, start adding some mana. Haven't played with the Root Path Purifier ever since it was released, but we'll be able to use that to grab non-basics with Cultivate and things like that. Enthusiastic Mechanaut makes artifacts cost 1 less, and Throwing Bird is ready for the Proliferate, 2 damage down the middle. Phyrexian Arena, Power Matrix for the Grixis player as well. I was hoping to see a fetch at some point during all this, maybe grab one with Elvish Reclaimer. Might be worth, I was going to go for the Rootpath Purifier, but now I think I'll go for the Elvish Reclaimer and the Aftermath Analyst, so that we can get Summoning Sickness away from the Reclaimer. So when the Analyst enters, we do Mill, and that is a Scape Shift. Shame to see the back of that, shame to see the back of Korvold. We were a few turns away from a land though. Astral Cornucopia, and that can easily be proliferated to add more mana, which is what's about to happen with the Thrumming Bird, I imagine. Hits us with 1 damage, and the Power Matrix deciding to give that +1/+1 at First Strike and Trample. And that goes on to add 2 mana, which means he can afford a Patrolling Peacemaker. I expect this to be proliferating a lot because it cares about us committing crimes, which is when we target an opponent or anything they control. Lagomos is the first commander to hit play, and swings the token into the left against a couple of 2/2s. Reanimate commits a crime, so it's going to proliferate this, and it's aimed at our Korvold. Does mean that he has to sacrifice something when it enters, so gives up on the Power Matrix straight away. Okay, there's a land for us to make for the turn. It is a Surveil land. We could maybe Surveil it into the bin to reanimate. I don't know. Let's just play it and make our decision based on what we see on top. Alright, a Polluted Delta on top, so I think I'd rather just play that next turn because we can play it straight into the Lotus Cobra. So keep that on top. I'm not going to crack the Aftermath Analyst this turn. Let's instead go for the Rootpath Purifier. Astral Cornucopia now tapping for 3 mana. We might have to tear asunder that sooner than later. In Spirit is now in play. Needs 8 counters on it in order to become a creature. Dispatch takes him down to 5 cards in hand and exiles the Korvold immediately. Don't think we were going to make any use of that regardless. Taps down the Peacemaker in order to put 3 counters on this, and decides to put charge counters onto the Cornucopia with his commander. Then Thrumming Bird straight down the middle again. Shatterstorm destroys all artifacts. Luckily for us, we didn't have any artifacts in play, but that really hurt this player. It allows us to keep hold of our spot removal that's in our hand. And again, the 2/1 swings into the left. That might be the Jeskai player out of the game already. Even if you're getting into a lot of artifact ramp, you need to be keeping up on your land drops for this exact reason. It hurt the Rakdos player who was relying on rocks as well. Speaking of which, throws out an Izzet Signet. So we've got Polluted Delta. Let's fix our red mana. Do we want to get down our commander here? I think that would be alright. And in order to be able to activate this, we do need to crew it straight away. So use the Lotus Cobra to do that. We need 2 counters so that we can tap it for 1. And that is sacrifice our Boseiju and draw a couple. We can play an additional land. And there's another fetch for us. Here's where we start to chain off here. I don't think we're winning, but we can at least get some stuff done this turn. So let's crack Polluted Delta and the Verdant Catacombs. And when the lands enter, they'll add mana with Lotus Cobra. Noteworthy there's an Urborg in play fixing the black mana for us. Not sure if I should be getting down tap lands here. I haven't exactly worked out the plays exactly. Throw down the Zuran Orb. That will allow us to sacrifice lands. We'll gain 2 life every time we do it, but we're mainly bothered about sacrificing the lands in a deck like this. Can't get up to 8 charge counters on this turn, unfortunately. Just sacrifice a basic, and we can search up any land we like here. So do we start looking at something like a Vendo? There's Susa as well, however you say that. I think we'll just go for Field of the Dead this early in the game. That makes us another mana, and that means that we can float the mana that we've got left in play, as long as we've got 4, sacrifice all of our lands, because we're going to bring them back immediately with the Aftermath Analyst. Sacrifice that with the 4 floating mana, and there we see a bunch of Field of the Dead triggers. We'll make mana with the Lotus Cobra, and we've got a Surveil with the Underground Mortuary as well, but not getting into an incredible amount in hand, unfortunately. I think I might be using some spot removal this turn to try and keep our opponents off our back. A Scatshroud Claim I don't think we necessarily need at this point. Want to be looking at more cards really. We'll throw that in the bin. Every chance that we see a board wipe here, but we can only do the crew at sorcery speed, so I'll just do it here. Alright, so we can sacrifice lands at instant speed, and each opponent will lose 2 life. We're not going to hurt them too much with that. We could hurt them with our spot removal though, as I mentioned. So let's go Tear Asunder onto the Izzet Signet, seeing as how we're seeing spiky plays here already. And then let's go Assassin's Trophy in case we need to hit a land with Beast Within. Let's put that onto the Phyrexian Arena. And then we'll swing down the middle. This guy's the threat compared to the other two. Apart from us, obviously. He's got a 4 grip and the most mana. We could easily be slowed down here. A Sheoldred's Edict. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. I think that might have to be the Lotus Cobra at this point, seeing as how we've got a decent amount of mana. Because like I said, if we draw into something that fetches basics, we can use this to get some non-basic lands into play. A Harrow fetching in Gaia's Cradle and Glacial Chasm sounds quite good. And so the Jeskai player scoops, having only 2 lands in play by turn 6. A Shattering Spree, and they could and probably should go after the Zuran Orb. And yep, decide to go for the sack outlet, that's fine. Don't think I'm going to sacrifice any mana here, but this guy has a lot of spot removal, so he's definitely the threat for us. And now he's got Cabal Coffers as well. That might be what we search up with the Elvish Reclaimer. And I won the Ruined Sage. Each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. That'll be a zombie for us. And then another Edict in Soul Shatter. Greatest mana value, so there goes our Purifier. He's using all his spot removal here though, going down to 3 cards in hand. Makes an Elemental we're not particularly interested in. And attacks into the right. A Fire Shrieker isn't going to do a whole lot with no creatures in play. Now I could go for the last 2 Surveil lands that are in the library and try and stack the top card of our library. And our commander's going to cost 6. We could still go for the Reclaimer after that, so yeah, let's do that. Although we can level up the commander and deal damage to our opponents, so let's just draw into whatever we draw into. A Geode Rager. Yeah, we'll get down our commander and crew it up first. Not too worried about goading everything while the board is in the state it's in. The Rakdos player holding up priority on us. He's only got 1 mana available. And the other player scoops because they were both knocked back by that, whatever it's called, Shatterstorm. So let's station our commander with the zombie tokens and go Polluted Delta for an untapped land. Actually, maybe should have crewed this all the way first so that we can start dealing damage like I said. I'm just trying to get an untapped land in so that we can activate the Hearthhull. And so let's do what I should have done in the first place. Let's finish crewing this so that it becomes a creature. I will Surveil with the Verdant Catacombs. Each opponent is going to lose 2 life. First time we've seen that because we've sacrificed the Verdant Catacombs. A Commercial District, seeing as how the Urborg is in play. We'll take a look at the top card of the library before we draw. And that is a Strip Mine that can just go in the graveyard. So now I think we can go through to combat. Our commander does have Vigilance, so we'll get some damage through here. We will lose 1 of our zombies. But here's where the threat of going wide with zombies comes in handy. Take a player out and then sacrifice a bunch of your lands to something like Zuran Orb and a souped up commander, and you're probably taking at least 1 player out. Double blocking on 1 zombie is fine. So we get them down to 11. Now let's activate our commander. Sacrifice can just be the Boseiju again. Each opponent loses a couple of life, and we will draw 2 additional cards. Getting to Will of the Sultai is really good so that we can bring back all the lands that are in the bin. There's a Blasphemous Edict, which we could easily play here, but there's no real need to. Hold up the 2 mana for the Elvish Reclaimer. And with the Anawan, we're going to have to sacrifice a zombie token. They're going to have to sacrifice their Lagomos, though. And that goes into the command zone, so I'm not sure what the aim was there. Thought they might be reanimating it. And there we see a Massacre Worm. This is loss of life. So we can't use Glacial Chasm to negate loss of life. We can only do it to negate damage. Anyway, I think we'll be alright. We've got 10 tokens, so we take 20 here. And there we see all the triggers on the stack, so we go down from 44 down to 24. Maybe you can get some kind of double damage effect onto us here. Plays a Safe Haven. So exile a target creature you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can sacrifice this land. If you do, return each card exiled with it onto the battlefield under your control, so that negates us going crazy with Field of the Dead, thanks to Massacre Worm. Let's go for Elvish Reclaimer. Just sacrifice a basic to keep the different lands up to Field of the Dead. Each opponent loses 2 life. It's a shame that we can't crew up these lands anymore, thanks to not having field accessible to us, but I think Cabal Coffers should be fine. Trigger for field again. And there's a Conduit of Worlds, so we can fetch something out of the bin. Maybe just kill off their Cabal coffers with the strip mine. Let's make as much mana as we can here with the coffers. That makes us 9 mana. We've only got 1 land drop per turn, thankfully. Otherwise our opponent would be in a bit more trouble. Although I'm not really looking to abuse strip mine that much. It really is for the fact that it sacrifices and it gets rid of stuff like this. So we'll aim that at the Cabal coffers. And once again our commander will trigger and knock him down to 5. Then we'll float a single green mana. Let's go Will of the Sultai. And our opponent scoops, unfortunately. That was going to be a plus counter on our commander for each land we control, and then we were going to reanimate all of our lands as well. And just so happens to be a decent number of lands on top of our library, the Fabled Passage and the Vesuva. Vesuva becomes a copy of Field of the Dead, so Field is a good lands matter card, who knew? But definitely would have had enough on our opponents there to swing in overhead for the victory. I think Beast Within would have been held up on the Flicker land, wait for them to exile their Massacre Worm under the land, then blow up the land. They obviously can't pay the cost of sacrificing it to bring it back, and we get a body off the board that way. So yeah, apologies for 2 players quitting there. I think they were justified at least, because that Shatterstorm did really hurt them. But like I said, this is what happens when you replace your land with mana rocks. Sometimes you're just unlucky and don't draw into the lands. Anyhow, hopefully you enjoyed this brief showing of Hearthhull. If you want to see it again, as ever, you must let me know in the comments section. Big thank you for the patrons keeping me independent on this channel. I've never had any sponsorships or anything, so they are the sole financial aid of the channel, and if you want to be a patron yourself, you can do so via the link in the description below. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.